Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Michael Reynolds, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I think you're going to be like episode 235, something like that, which is kind of kooky for me to think about. One of my earlier guests connected me to you, Andrew Ting, who I was thinking about this earlier today. He may be one of the 5 nicest people I've ever met.
He is unbelievable. If you haven't had a chance to listen to his version of this podcast, he's unbelievable. He's a great man. He's got the perfect blend of humility, but yet intelligence and directness and guidance. He's an all-around great guy.
Yeah, and diversity of interests is like no other person I've ever been around. Like he has a lot of really fun interests in there. They're pretty different from each other.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's one of the best guys I've met for sure.
Yeah, so when we connected before today, you and I have Belize in common. And when I say Belize in common, I've been there 5 or 6 times. You have a business that we'll talk about in a bit. I had a very different view of Belize as a tourist, a guy that went there no more than 10 days at a time. And you've spent a good chunk of the year, even now, there. And you said, when you're not a tourist, it's a very different place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious to hear your insights into what it's like being a tourist versus being a resident / business owner. It's quite different.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk about it, actually. But let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up, oddly enough, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which was, a pretty idyllic place to grow up. It's the stock phrase is I'm glad to be from there. But it's typical Mayberry RFD back in those days. It was about 50,000 people, and you ride your bikes everywhere. It was stand and deliver with your friends, walking down the train tracks, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I was anxious to get out of there by the time I was reaching my adulthood, but always appreciative of the opportunities I had to live there.
So you went to school, you did what your parents told you, and then in your free time, you kind of just did whatever you wanted to.
Exactly. Yeah, I was lucky. I got heavily involved in drama and music actually in middle school. It was kind of a fun story. I had no interest I got interested in music early, so I was doing that. But I had no interest in drama and took a class in middle school, and one of the directors there said, you ought to audition for the annual school musical in middle school. And I thought, okay. And I did, and I got the lead. So the first part I ever got was the lead. And the funny part for me was I was kind of a nerd. I was kind of an intellectual, nerdish guy and not very popular with women for my choices. And I can still to this day remember after the first performance of the school musical, standing back in the dressing room, which was a classroom. And all of a sudden, all these women started coming in and talking to me. And I could literally, it's like a light bulb. It was almost like the heavens open. I could hear that sound. It's like I have found my calling on how to be popular. So it was really almost like a switch. It was really great, and it was a big part of my life for a long time. In fact, we can talk about this if you want. I wound up studying drama in college for a while.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. I also want to connect with you on this topic. My mom, I'm a mama's boy. She had a pretty big influence on me as a kid, and I was a jock. Wasn't necessarily super popular, but I was a jock, and she wanted me to have diverse experiences, and so she told me to go try out for the Sound of Music. I ended up being Friedrich, which is the oldest boy, and I think the second oldest kid out of the 7. But I was actually the 6th oldest out of the 7 in reality. But women seemed to gravitate to me after I had that role. And then my career ended with the next play. I went out for Oliver Twist, and I became orphan number 22.
Oh, funny. You had your 15 minutes of fame, and that was it, huh?
Yeah, then I was done. Yeah. No, that's cool. I definitely want to explore that some more. So how was your family out in South Dakota for generations, or did?
No, actually, we were the first generation to move there. My family grew up, my mother was a second generation Italian. My father had been in the United States, Mayflower type of family, but they wound up settling in Nebraska. So there were dirt farmers in middle Nebraska and wound up settling in Omaha ultimately, which is where I was born, in fact. And then my father he worked for Northwestern Bell Telephone Company back when there were the Ma Bell organizations, and got promoted and moved to Sioux Falls. So that's how we wound up there.
Yeah, well, you and I have a lot of fun connections. My mother-in-law is a second generation Italian in this country, but she was in Jersey.
No kidding. Where? What part of Italy?
Sicily, and I cannot remember the name of the town for the life of me.
Okay.
But
Well, we'll have to connect on that, because my grandmother was from Sicily. My grandfather was from Naples. And in fact, I just 2 years ago went to Sicily out of coincidence and did some family research, which was a lot of fun. I hired an interpreter and went to all the local record banks and searched for records for my family. Yeah, it was really, really interesting.
That's really cool. I think she has a brother who's into genealogy, and I think she knows probably more than the average person, but there's probably a lot more she could learn.
Interesting. It's fascinating to look back. And unfortunately for me, I was much closer to my father. Both my parents have passed away. I was much closer to my father. And so I was very interested in the Irish heritage, and not that interested in the Italian heritage, just because I wasn't close to my mother. And after she passed, I started meeting people from her family, distant relatives I'd never met, and became fascinated with her side of the family. So regrettably, I never got the chance to, really pick her brain about family heritage. So I picked up everything kind of on my own, but it's been a fun journey, because I picked up everything about her father and everything about her mother from other relatives. It's been great.
Yeah, and they the first generation that came to the U.S., I can't understand what they went through to get here, because they were not treated well, is my understanding.
Well, and in fact, my grandfather was sent over at age 13 with a little pack and a few dollars, and said, "Good luck. And by the way, take the neighbor boy. He's 8. He needs to find a life too." So he basically took the neighbor boy. No relatives. He was the first one here. And branching off a little bit, one of the great denouements in my life, when I talked about not knowing much about my Italian side of the family, was I knew that story all my life, because the little 8-year-old boy became my very dear uncle. And was always at every family gathering. He considered my grandfather, even though they're only 5 years apart, his father. But I went to a family reunion not that long ago, 10 years ago, probably, here in Illinois, oddly enough. And when I walked into the family reunion, I didn't really know any of these people, just talked to them a little bit on the phone. And the music stopped, and they said, "Our guest of honor is here," when I walked in. And I was very, what do you mean the guest of honor? I'm just a schmo. Turns out, unbeknownst to me, my grandfather had paved the way for all these people in this room ultimately to come to the United States, because he was the first one that came over, and they call him the Three Brothers. And he paved the way for his other 2 brothers to come to the United States, found them jobs, found them on the railroad, of course, and helped support them to get their feet on the ground, get them across the passage. And they all revered him. And they said whenever they called him Charlie, his name was Carmine, but whenever Charlie would come back from Nebraska, where he wound up settling, to Illinois, which was kind of where everybody else settled, they rolled out the red carpet. Everything stopped, and all the mothers cooked everything in the world, and then the bands fired up, and it was just a wonderful thing. So it was very touching, actually. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, that's great family history to that. I'm glad you learned that about your family. That's
for sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do this to you again. Just another quick connection. I've been to Italian family reunions every 5 years for a long time now, and we take a picture of the whole group. I am not Italian. I'm 6'3". I'm 6 inches taller than the next tallest person in the picture.
That's funny. I love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful to stack the 5 or 6 pictures up and just like, that guy doesn't belong. I don't think he's supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's the Italian culture is fascinating. I mean, it's kind of a private, humble community, at least in my family, very private, very humble. And things I learned, like, for example, when I decided to go to Sicily, I did I started this family research and found that my grandmother, unbeknownst to me, who passed away before I was born, so I didn't know her, but unbeknownst to me, had 13 siblings that never came up in conversation. My understanding all my life was that she was an only child and had no family. And she had 13 siblings, who all of whom I tracked down. Many are deceased, but I tracked down all their families, and that was incredible. Just incredible.
So your mom had 13 aunts and uncles.
Mm-hmm, that's right. That were never discussed, never met them, never talked about them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been in your life. I mean, I'm sure plenty of them were alive when you were a kid.
Oh, I'm sure. And some of them actually were in the United States. I mean, some stayed in Italy, but some were in the United States. Craziest thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
there was probably some rift that happened, and everyone just stops talking to each other in that era, and that's probably what happened, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and let's go back to your grandfather coming over here at the age of 13 and brings the neighbor kid at age 8. Could you have? I mean, people would freak out if their 22-year-old did that. I think.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's probably a statement of the times, and B, I'm guessing a statement of the desperation of some of the folks back then, the inability to support their kids and knowing that there's no life there for them. It's incredible to even think about. I wish I could go back in time and talk to him about those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine my 8-year-old kid leaving with the prospect of probably never seeing him or her again.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the case. They never did see their parents again, either one of them.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Our generation, I think you and I are roughly the same age. Our generation and certainly younger generations really can't appreciate how lucky we've had it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt about it.
All right. So you decide Sioux Falls and South Dakota in general, I think, because did you go to college out of state?
I did. I went to Northwestern here in Chicago. That's
okay.
how I moved here.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this will be fun. Is Northwestern hard to get into generally? My understanding is it is.
Tremendously hard. Yes. Right.
Yeah, and as my kids will remind me, like, yeah, Dad, you got into a certain school, but it was a lot easier back in the 80s. I'm like, you're probably not wrong. There's certainly more people now vying for those spots.
Yeah.
But is it harder to get into out of state, or Northwestern doesn't care?
I suspect the fact that I was from South Dakota helped, to tell you the truth. Now I had great grades. I have a lot of flaws in life, but one of the things I'm very good at is taking tests in school. And I was always top of my class and top SAT and all that. But I remember distinctly sitting in the freshman orientation with 650 other students, and the dean said, "We have students from, Nairobi to blah, 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 to blah, 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 and even Sioux Falls, South Dakota." So I thought, really, you have to point that out? I mean, but
it was that far.
I know, no, it's not. And in fact, one of the reasons I picked it is I was lucky enough to have a choice of a bunch of schools, but I thought that's far enough away from home that I'm away, but close enough as far as ethic and all. It's still the Midwest, and I could get home, in a day. So that's one of the reasons I picked it. But it was interesting because nobody in South Dakota really leaves South Dakota. I mean, almost all of my classmates, the farthest they would branch out, I mean, really going out there on a limb would be University of Minnesota. That was like people going crazy, but most everybody else went, maybe to some of the color schools in Iowa and maybe one or two in Nebraska. But almost everybody went to University of South Dakota or South Dakota State University, and they just looked at me like I was some strange oddity. And I remember even some of my teachers in high school just didn't believe me that I was doing this. They thought I was making it up. It's like, you're not going there. It's like, yeah, I actually am. No, you're not. It was crazy.
So the culture is everybody stays. What do you think that's born out of?
That's a great question. I think, this may sound insulting to my home state, but it's a very cloistered place. And I think there's just no encouragement to go out and explore the world. I mean, everything you need here. Why do you have to go anywhere else? It's very much that type of attitude. And there's some people who branch out, and I think it's changed a lot. Sioux Falls has grown from 50,000, 40,000. I was there to, I think it's over 250,000 now.
Oh, wow.
It's gotten really big, partly because of the tax incentives for businesses to go there and its proximity to so many different states. But I think back in that era, it was discouraged to leave the state. That this isn't good enough for you. This should be good enough for you. It was kind of that thing.
Yeah, and the irony is, generations before your generation, somebody came from very far away. A lot of people came from very far away to make a life for themselves. Some of it may have been too that, like, hey, you need to stick around to help the family with money, with financial matters. Well,
that's true. And now that you say that, of course, it was largely an agricultural environment for most people. So yes, you stuck around and helped dad and mom at the farm. You were help. So we weren't of that ilk. My dad was a executive with the phone company, but I think for a lot of people, that kind of mentality stuck around.
Northwestern is known as at least as a guy from Virginia, I think of Northwestern as like an almost Ivy League, and it probably would be Ivy League if it was founded 100 years earlier, kind of thing. What's the origin story for Northwestern?
You mean my story with Northwestern?
No, I mean in general, and then your.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't even know exactly the origin story, to tell you the truth. I couldn't tell you. I know it's fairly old. It was started in the 1850s. I know that, but I really don't know how it wound up being what it is.
Well, here's a different question. What is Northwestern known for today, or over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 decades?
That's a good question as well. It's really heavy in the arts. It's got, at one time it had the best drama school and the best music school in the United States. I'm sure it's arguably not that anymore, but it did have that reputation for some time. Excellent in economics, excellent in political science, excellent in engineering. Those are probably the things that stands out.
And so what attracted you to Northwestern in part was the pursuit of drama?
Yeah, that was almost 100% it. My thought process was this, and it was interesting. I've had this conversation recently with people. My wife is from Connecticut, so she had all sorts of advantages as far as like having great school counselors and contacts. In South Dakota, our school counselor was just some guy that taught gym, and he had an office where he had some books that, school pamphlets. And if you'd ask him questions about anything other than the state schools, he'd kind of shrug. So I actually just stumbled upon Northwestern by looking through some of the brochures on his countertop and studied it and saw, well, this is interesting. I don't know much about the school, did some research, and I was going to pursue drama, but I was practical enough even at that age. And I remember telling my parents this, I said, look, I'm going to try the drama thing, knowing that it's a long shot and it maybe not be something I want to pursue. But if I go to a place like Northwestern and I decide to flip out of drama, I've got this great liberal arts school behind me for other pursuits. Whereas if I go to some conservatory or something like that, I'm kind of stopping out to switch schools. Yeah. And they thought that was a pretty practical approach. And that is indeed exactly what happened. After my second year, I decided, it's fun, but this is not the way I want to spend my life.
What changed for you?
It was almost an epiphanal type of thing. And I think part of it, as strange as this sounds, is, and I think this goes for a lot of people in drama, God bless them all, and I have so many friends still involved in drama, it is a methodology for getting your ego stroked. It's almost, it's almost self-confidence building. And so and I think once I Northwestern was life-changing for me, because when I went there with somewhat of a lack of confidence, and I built so much confidence while I was there that I literally kind of woke up one day and said, this has been fun. I'm good at it. I've proven while being at Northwestern that actually I probably could make some form of living doing this, who knows at what level, but I was excelling as far as getting parts and getting directorial opportunities and but I just said, but I want to have a family and I want to have more balance in my life, and the instability of knowing where the next paycheck might come from is not a lifestyle I want to live. So I literally that day woke up, walked over to the registrar's office and switched majors to poli-sci, much to the chagrin of my drama teacher. When fall came around, he literally knocked on my door and had some very strong words for me about why would I do something like this.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, right? And yeah, not knowing where the next paycheck is coming from is scary to, I think, most of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know what the stats are, but I imagine for every Tom Cruise, there are thousands of failed Tom Cruises.
Well, and it's funny because Northwestern has just a barrage of very famous actors. I mean, I could sit here for the next half hour and rattle them off. Friends of mine, actually, or acquaintances, and I have an equal number. Well, actually, no, I don't have an equal number. I have 5 times as many friends who are 100 times more gifted than those people who never made it and are either flipped out and did something else 25 years ago, or are still kind of just muddling along, getting a part here and there, but doing something else on the side. So it's almost never related to talent. It's related to luck of the draw, looks, voice, something of that nature. So that methodology of being rewarded was just not appealing to me ultimately.
Yeah, it feels like it's based on happenstance, I imagine.
Sure. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. But then, I mean, some of the people, one of my stories about Northwestern, this was so intimidating. I walked in, and the first day I walked in to the theater department, I went backstage and they were rehearsing A Streetcar Named Desire. And the guy playing Stanley Kowalski, I couldn't see him at first, but I heard this just unbelievably mellifluous voice and just booming and just filled the entire auditorium. And it scared me because I thought, if this is my competition, I'm toast. And it turned out, just coincidentally, the first actor I ever saw on stage in Northwestern was Clancy Brown, which may not be a name you recognize.
His brother played football at my alma mater.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, he's in my favorite. He was in my favorite movie.
Which one's that?
Shawshank Redemption.
It's a great movie. Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to say Highlander because I know that's kind of a cult.
He was also in the Highlander, and I'm kind of one of those cult members for that movie. But yeah, no, he's a great actor.
He's a great actor, and that voice was unbelievable. And he's about 6'4", and so he's got quite a presence. And I thought, I might as well pack my bags right now when I heard him talk.
So Clancy's, I guess, 2 or 3 years older than you?
Yeah, I think he was a senior at that time. I was a freshman, so yes.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with Clancy Brown because he's one of the main characters, plays one of the main characters in my favorite movie.
Yeah. And he was a very nice guy too. He was kind of, I wouldn't say he was a mentor of mine by any stretch, but he was a mentor to the freshman class. He, was not arrogant at all. I mean, there was just certain people like him that you knew there was something special. There was 2 or 3 of them you just knew, oh yeah, this guy's going to be something else. And he was just very humble and very gracious.
Yeah, I've never met the man, but I do think highly of him because of that movie and some other things he's done. And I've always dreamed that he was a really nice guy. And
you're right, yeah. And he still is. I'm still a Facebook friend of his, and he does great things. And he's Mr. Crab on SpongeBob. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
I know. It took me a while. I didn't know that either. And then he was just posting something. I went, no. I mean, I watched that with my kids, and sure enough, yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool. All right, so you mentioned music earlier. Is that singing, or are you an instrumentalist as well?
Both. I was an all-state trumpet player, and also was all-state choir and honors choir in South Dakota. And then I sang some in college and did a lot of musical theater. And then another little tidbit about me, which is kind of strange, is I got involved in barbershop quartet singing. As weird as that sounds. And the way that happened was I had some buddies in high school. We were all in chorus, all in the small groups, and we were looking for something to do at the talent show. And I happened to have some old barbershop music in the piano bench that was my grandmother's piano bench. I have no idea where it came from. And I just pulled it out and I said, well, we could do this. We don't need anyone to accompany us. And so we learned a couple barbershop songs and we had some fun. We got selected for the talent show, and that was great. And then somebody in the audience was involved in the barbershop society, which I didn't even know existed, honestly. Came up to us after the show and said, you guys need to get involved in the barbershop society. And I said, what are you talking about? And great guy. He had a quartet. They coached us and told us all about the society. And at this time I was a senior, and he said, you're going to Chicago. Chicago is the hotbed of barbershop music, oddly enough. And he turned out he was right. It isn't any longer, but at that time Illinois had its own district. Most of the other districts in the society were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other states, but Illinois had so many people involved. It had its own district and produced more international champions from Illinois in that kind of late 70s, early 80s era than any other district. So it was just incredible when I got here. I got involved right away and found a quartet that was a college quartet. And we had an unbelievable time going around and singing around campus and competing in competitions. And then the best job I've ever had, don't tell Andrew Ting this, but the best job I've ever had was singing in a strolling barbershop quartet at Great America Amusement Park, just outside of Chicago.
And strolling is just that. You stroll around the park singing.
What we literally did, and I don't know if this is kosher for blended audiences, is we would look for the prettiest girl we could find and go sing to her and try to get a phone number usually. And then we find another one.
It goes back to the women talking to you after your first lead.
Exactly. Even I used to joke, even barbershoppers have groupies. It was a terrific job. It was so much fun.
Did you do barbershop throughout college and after college?
I did. When I went to law school, I got pretty busy, so I didn't really do it then. And then when I first started practicing, I didn't do it then. But after I'd kind of gotten into the swing of things, and the kids were kind of a little bit more self-sufficient, I went back to what's called the Northbrook New Tradition Chorus, which actually won international. It was a very salty chorus. And I sang with that chorus for a number of years and had another number of quartets that did pretty well competition-wise. We never won international as a quartet, but we did compete at the international level. So that was fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So in a typical quartet, you've got a bass, a tenor, an alto, and
you got a tenor, a lead, a baritone, and a bass.
I made up alto. I just
that would be you're pretty right. If it's a mixed chorus, it's soprano, alto, baritone, bass. So you were close.
Okay, right on. Yeah, I can't sing. Do you know you have a good voice when you hear yourself? Because what you hear without assistance is different than what everybody else hears, right?
Yeah, I don't think I have a good voice. What I think I do have is I always called it an intelligent voice. I'm really good at being able to fit into a chord and know if I'm flat, know if I'm sharp. I have some pretty good resonance, which helps, especially in the barbershop, because the whole goal of barbershop singing is to create this level of harmonics that you're kind of creating harmonic upon harmonic upon harmonic, and you have to have some resonance to do that. It's like if you ever take a keyboard, a piano, not a keyboard, take a piano and you hold down very gently a high C without making any noise. And if you go down to a lower C and you slam on that lower C and make it resonate, you will hear that higher C because of the concept of harmonics. That's the same principle as barbershop harmony. Okay. So I know I'm very intelligent. I was really good at being able to figure out the chords and know my place in it, and whether it be a little sharper, a little lower. But as far as like a soloist, I've never considered myself a good soloist.
Have people told you you're a good soloist?
I've heard that, but yeah, I don't think I am. I mean, I continue to get leads in musicals and the like for a lot of years, but I think that was a combination of being a decent actor and having an okay voice.
So what does it take to be a decent actor?
What's it take to be a decent actor? I think self-awareness and being an observer of the human condition, honestly. Just yesterday, I played this great little video clip. I don't know if you've seen it, of Ian McClellan talking to Ricky Gervais about acting.
I have not seen it, but I'm going to check it out.
You got to look it up, because, Ricky Gervais is asking him about acting, and he goes, well, what I do is I pretend to be the person I'm supposed to be. For example, he does a much better job than I'm doing. I was asked by Peter Jackson to play the part of a wizard. Now, I am not a wizard, but I thought about what it would be like to be a wizard, and I acted. And I pretended to be the wizard. So, I mean, there's some level to that where you just have that skill or you don't, honestly.
I wonder if that was set up, like Ricky and whoever was behind the camera knew they were going to do that. Yeah,
for sure.
Still hilarious.
It was for sure. Yeah, it was great though. And he'd say it's things like, so here's how it works. Ian, Sir Ian, wizard. Then I do that for 2 or 3 hours, then it'd be Sir Ian.
That's hilarious. He didn't choose the method acting approach, it sounds like.
No, just like I can't think of the actor's name on Succession, Brian Cox. He's very much of that ilk where he just goes, just act. I'm an actor, I act. And one of the other characters whose name escapes me, who plays his son, is very much into method acting, like one of those guys you can't talk to one-on-one. He's in his part all the time, and he kind of plays a jerk and a very troubled kid. And you can just tell Brian Cox has no patience for him when he's talking about him in interviews. Like, just act the part. Don't be an idiot. I mean, come on.
So Brian Cox doesn't believe Daniel Day-Lewis is going about it the right way, it sounds like.
No, not at all. He doesn't get it.
All right. So when you broke away from drama halfway through undergrad and you decided to major in poli-sci, was the idea law school?
Yeah, that was always kind of in the back of my head. That I don't want to call it a fallback, because it was kind of something I was just as intrigued by as drama, but I really wanted to give the drama thing a shot. So it was immediate flip into the whole law thing.
And what were you going to do with a law degree after school?
What I wound up doing actually, which was I wanted to be a litigator, and I didn't want to do criminal law, and I didn't want to do personal injury law or medical malpractice. I wanted to do commercial litigation. So, yeah, ultimately wound up working for a large blue chip law firm doing business litigation.
So for the novice on that topic, tell me a little bit more about business litigation.
Sure. It's all civil, meaning there's no criminal component to it at all. It's typically a business suing another business. It could be trademark infringement. It could be breach of contract. It could be securities issues. It could be employment issues. It could be discrimination issues, things of that nature.
And so that sort of litigation, it's not niche because there are a lot of lawyers that do that, I imagine.
That's right.
But how did it get your attention, or what was it about that was of interest to you?
Well, I think part of it was I felt like that was a way I could kind of bring my dramatic skills to the table, my ability to articulate my point, sell an audience, so to speak, a jury, a judge, whoever was someone I was advocating to. I liked the notion of thinking on my feet. And it was really distasteful to me to do, as I mentioned a moment ago, personal injury or medical malpractice or criminal law, which were the other elements of the ability to do litigation. I just had no desire to do any of that. The criminal law is just, it's one thing to deal with people's money and the fate of their money. It's a whole different thing to deal with the fate of their personal freedom. And I just didn't want that pressure. So I thought it was a perfect blend. And then it was, and frankly, a nice way to make a living. There are better ways to make a living, but it was a nice way to make a living.
No, I mean, that's a brilliant answer. And it sounds like it's a very comprehensive and concise answer. So I appreciate that.
It is. But having said that, I mean, if there's any budding lawyers out there that are listening, we take our concept of what it is to be a lawyer from TV and what our minds make up. And as you probably know, 99.9% of what you do as a commercial litigator, particularly, is all paperwork. Yeah. And the times you get into court are few and far between. And they're very rewarding when you do, but that's not what you're doing day in and day out as a commercial litigator. As a prosecutor, a little different story. You're doing a lot of motion practice, a lot of arraignments and things of that nature. But as a business litigator, you're not in court that often.
Yeah. My dad's a lawyer, and I saw what he was going, and he was a small town attorney. He was doing everything from A to Z for whoever in town needed his services. I'm like, that doesn't appeal to me at all. But
good for you. Good for your dad that he didn't try to encourage you to go into that profession. I always say one of my greatest successes in life is that neither of my kids is an attorney.
Yeah, you and my dad, I imagine, have heard a million lawyer jokes.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
All right. So you did that for a while, and are you still doing that in part?
I call myself a recovering attorney. So I did that. I did the traditional practice for about 15 years. And then I went in-house with one of my clients who had kind of wooed me out of the practice, and was so grateful to do that. It's been such a better environment for me. It's just, here's one of the things about commercial litigation that's tough is I might have told you this when we talked the first time, you're always in a state of battle. And even though you're not in court, you're always in a state of battle because you're battling, obviously, the other side, opposing counsel. And they're always telling you how stupid you are and how wrong you are and how you don't know how to interpret the law. And you're taking that every day, day in and day out. And they're always trying to poke holes in everything you say all day, every day. You're fighting many judges. I have respect for the judicial system, but a lot of judges, especially in the state court system, become judges for the pension. And they aren't doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. And they don't like lawyers that come from the big fancy law firms, and they like to teach them a lesson. So they don't necessarily follow the law. They just want to throw around their weight, and it's frustrating. And so you're fighting those judges. There are many other judges that are great, but you're fighting those judges. You're fighting your partners because everybody thinks they should have a bigger piece of the pie. That's a constant struggle and battle. And then you're also, oddly enough, fighting your clients because they always think that they should get all of your attention, they should get all of your time, their work should be prioritized above all other cases. And most of the people I represented were very high-end business profile people who felt that they were smarter than anyone else, including you. So they wanted to tell you how to try their case, even though you're the professional they aren't in this realm. But you're constantly battling them. And if you won, of course we won because we should have won. If you lost, it's your fault. So I found it, and there's an old adage for litigators that you only have so many cases in you. And I think that is the truth. So I was so grateful to flip over into doing more genteel, proactive in-house counsel work where everyone's striving to do commerce and to do something that's in their minds at least valuable, and they all are working towards a common goal. They aren't fighting each other.
Well, Michael, what you just described, I imagine you and others that have experienced what you've experienced for that 15-year period, you probably have a bit of PTSD.
A little bit. It's funny you say that, because sometimes when I've had to walk into law firms again, and I see these poor young associates sitting at their desks, eating their salads and hunched over, I think, oh, I'm so glad I'm out of that. I'm grateful for it, and I worked for a fantastic couple of firms, actually, really great firms. So I have no ill will or ill feelings towards that. But yes, I'm really grateful to have been out of that. But what you learn about law school is those skills can follow you in anything you do. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. I can't tell you how important that's been in everything I've done ever since, including starting the business in Belize.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a couple minutes. Law school, which year was the hardest? And walk me through. Did you take the Illinois bar?
Yes.
And walk me through the bar experience.
Okay. Well, as far as law school itself, that's always a fun experience. Of course, I think for almost anybody, the first year is the most intimidating because you have no idea what to expect, and it's not like undergrad. It's quite a different animal. This whole Socratic method thing and almost all large survey courses is quite intimidating. And one of the things I learned in law school, which was kind of funny and sounds really terrible, but I was very intimidated when I got to law school because so many people seemed to know what they were doing, and they'd raise their hand in class all the time, and they'd have articulate answers. And I was, sitting in the back of the class, praying not to be called upon. And they posted the grades at the first semester before I came home for Christmas, and I refused to look at them because my philosophy was, I'm sure I bombed and I don't want to ruin my holiday. I'll look at it when I get back. And I got back, and lo and behold, I got straight A's,
Wow.
really high scores. And then what I noticed after that, all those people that were raising their hands, you never heard from again. They were the ones that got the D's and the F's, first semester. So
ironically, they may have been actors.
Maybe, could be, but it was this kind of shift. You all of a sudden could tell. Not the grades were anonymous, but you could feel the shift of the people that did well first semester and the people that didn't do well. So that was great. So once I passed that threshold, it was, Katie bar the door. Everything was fun and great, and I was involved in all sorts of things and felt very confident. And then as far as the bar exam, that was also a very interesting undertaking. I don't know what it is like today because this was a long time ago, but they had this amazing bar review program where the law firm would pay for all the new associates to go off. You'd work from like 8 a.m. until noon, and then you'd have lunch, and then at 1 o'clock you'd go to this other locale with every other budding lawyer in the Chicagoland area, and you'd listen to these courses that this one guy particularly would run, and you'd be there for 5-6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and he would walk through each of the courses and walk through a bunch of questions. And he would say things like, you will see this question on the Illinois bar. You will see this question, take note. And then you do practice exams and all that. And by golly, when I walked into that bar, it's like, I literally thought, is there some collusion between this course and the folks that put together the exam? Because it was almost as if we had a cheat sheet. It was crazy. So yeah. I felt pretty confident going into the bar exam. It was a great thing. I'm sure there wasn't collusion, but it sure felt like it. But it was an amazing training course.
I would hope there was no collusion there. Yeah,
I would hope not. But it is Illinois after all.
I'm glad you said it. I'm glad you said it. I was thinking. How were you notified that you passed?
By letter. And so the letters came out of Springfield, Illinois, the state capital. And so my colleagues who lived in towns around Springfield were getting their notices, and those of us in Chicago had not. And so, you started hearing, I passed. And I kept looking at my mailbox, And it was agony for a couple of days, but then
I bet.
finally, and then you get this envelope, and there was a story going around that if it was either whether it was a thin envelope, it was bad news, or if it was a thick envelope, it was bad news. And as I was looking at this very thin envelope, I could not remember for the life of me which was which. So, that what seemed like 2 hours it took me to open the envelope. It's like, what does this mean? Is this so? But luckily, the thin envelope was good news.
There's more irony there in that you had to remember a lot of things to pass the bar, and you couldn't remember what thin meant.
That's right. And then it was the first and last time I ever had a migraine headache. I opened that envelope and got hit with the worst headache of my entire life. I had to go lay down for the rest of the day.
Oh, wow.
It was just like all the pressure just going.
Yeah. That's good that was your last one.
That's right.
All right, so let's talk about Belize. Andrew told me that you had some things you could share with me about Belize. You and I chatted, so I have a better feel for it, but the listening audience should hear this. I was really excited to talk to you about Belize because my wife and I have been there, as I mentioned earlier, a few times, and we absolutely adore it as tourists because I think the folks of Belize, especially of that peninsula, Ambergris Caye, that's how they make money. Tourism is very, very good for them. And you said in our previous conversation, around the 2-month mark, if you stay there 2 months or longer, it starts to turn a little bit. Can you describe that turn?
Absolutely. And I love the people of Belize. So let me preface it by that. But you hit it spot on. It is all about tourism. So you want to talk about acting. Most of the folks in Belize who are involved in the tourism industry are acting, and they're acting as if they're the most gracious and wonderful and welcoming people in the entire world. And that's what tourists take away from it. And you see that all the time in reviews and the like. It's like, oh, they're the most inviting and engaging and wonderful human beings on the face of the planet. Most of them, the second you turn around and you stop and they stop smiling and you're off and they wave goodbye, they're looking at how much tip you gave them and they're cursing you and
oh, bad.
And talking about how much they wish they were doing something different, and pulling out the rum, and it's a whole different thing. So that's kind of one of the deep dark secrets. That's probably not different than most tourism industries elsewhere, but it's the one I'm most familiar with, honestly.
Yeah, they're good actors. I'll give them that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I ran into a bad actor.
They're very, very good at it. Once in a great while, you'll find one that's just in the wrong profession. They don't last very long. Who just can't take dealing with the ugly Americans, because that's part of it too. I mean, in their defense, we're insufferable as
most of us are, for sure.
Yeah, we want everything. We're very high demand, and as you know, being there, one of the charms of Belize is it's very rough and tumble. It is not white sands, white tablecloths, gentlemen with white jackets serving you Mai Tais on a tray out on the beach. It's a Jimmy Buffett, Jerry Jeff Walker kind of rugged place. And so if you come there, like some people do, with the expectation that they're going to be in, I don't know, St. Thomas or something like that, they can be very upset that they're not getting the experience they anticipated, and they'll take it out on the Belizeans that they're not getting the white collar treatment, or the white glove treatment, excuse me.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife and I really enjoyed it because it wasn't white glove. We would leave where we were staying and nobody said, hey, be careful. You have to go out with large groups, or you should never leave unless you're on a guided tour by somebody who works for this resort. We just went into town in San Pedro and just kind of mixed it up with the local, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, and part of it is what you said at the very outset, which is they're smart enough to know their bread and butter is tourism. And if they start hassling the tourists or robbing the tourists or anything of that nature, the golden goose goes away. So they're very deferential to tourists when it comes to that. It's very rare when you hear about a tourist getting in any type of scuffle with anyone down there.
All right, so Michael, how's a kid from South Dakota, Northwestern grad? Did you go to law school at Northwestern as well?
No, I went to UCLA, actually.
Oh, wow. Oh, hold on. And you told me that in the first conversation, so I apologize for forgetting that. What's a Midwest kid who's been living that vibe for roughly 22 years and then going out to Southern California? That had to be a massive shift for you.
It was a huge shift. It went from, Northwestern was very conservative. It went from having a guy who used to run literally up Sheridan Road every day with a Ronald Reagan flag. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
So I went from that environment to walking into UCLA where there was 10 cities protesting apartheid. Completely flip-flop of an environment. But there were kind of three factors that led me there. One was financial aid was phenomenal for me, thanks to the UCLA Board of Regents. So that was a big factor. I was paying for my own law school. Second is one of the areas of law I did want to really pursue in my earlier days and did a lot of litigation in this regard is communications law. So like FCC type regulatory based litigation. And at that time, I don't think it is anymore, but UCLA was the #1 school in the country for communications law. And the third factor was my favorite, which is I was going to go to Northwestern Law. Northwestern Law School is downtown Chicago, as opposed to Northwestern undergrad, which is in a suburb north called Evanston. And so I took the train from from Evanston to Northwestern to actually meet with some of the folks at Northwestern Law School to see if I wanted to go there. I went down on an April day, and there was this stuff coming from the sky that they called like sleet, but there were basically BBs smacking my face as I was walking to the Northwestern campus. I was soaking wet. I had, basically it looked like I had chicken pox because I got slammed by this sleet. I walked downstairs in the basement where there was a men's room, and I literally said out loud in the mirror, "Son, if you're going to go through 3 years of hell, you're going to do it in California. You're not going to do it here." And that was really the deciding factor.
Wow. Yeah, that's Chicagoland is known for its weather. I've never experienced what you just described.
It was unbelievable. Yeah, and I sometimes wish I would have gone to Northwestern because it definitely is a cool place and has a great reputation. But I met so many amazing people, and at UCLA I was lucky enough to get they offered these externships where you could spend a semester actually working and getting credit at the Federal Communications Commission. And I was fortunate enough to get a job with just this great guy named Dennis Patrick, who wound up being the chairman of the FCC. And so I worked in his office, and he and I became fast friends, and it was just a fantastic experience. So I'm really gratified I did that. But yeah.
Well, what's interesting, you stopped doing drama actively halfway through undergrad, and then you end up in a place where many consider the acting mecca in the world.
That's right.
Did the drama thing start to rise in you again?
Not really, but it was fun, seeing the stars walking down the street once in a while, because UCLA is in Westwood, if you're familiar with the LA region, and there is actually a lot of celebrities that wander around Westwood. So it was kind of fun to go, there's Dustin Hoffman, there's, so-and-so. It was fun. But no, I never got the bug to go back to it.
Yeah. All right. So I had this wonderful setup for my question about Belize, but I'll abbreviate it. How did you end up even going to Belize, and then much less starting a business there? Sure.
That's a fun story. It's not that far in the history banks, actually. So about 2015, 2016, I met my second wife. We fell madly in love with each other. We actually knew each other at Northwestern, oddly enough, and hadn't talked since, but stumbled upon each other again. The first date we had basically was, she said, "Hi, I remember me. I'm Bonnie. I hate my job and I hate my life." And that was kind of the first thing out of her mouth. She was completely burned out as an executive with an advertising agency that she'd been doing since she left college. I was completely burned out doing in-house counsel work for a really high-end company. And my mentor, my boss, was dying of cancer, and I didn't really see a path forward at that company. Once he left, I didn't really want to be there. So we were both kind of in a state of unhappiness with where our careers were at that particular time. Layer on top of that we just found each other, and it was clear very quickly. We're very cynical and practical people. It was clear very quickly that we'd found something really special, and we weren't any spring chicks. So we were having these conversations like, well, gosh, it'd be nice to find a way to spend more time with each other now that we found each other after all these years. We're getting up at 5 and going to the gym, and then schlepping to the office and collapsing on the couch at 8 o'clock doesn't sound like what we want to do now that we found each other. And as we're having these conversations, my best buddy from college calls up out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in about 5 years, probably. And he said, guess what? And I said, what? He said, I'm in Belize. I moved to Belize. I've sold everything. And he was a very successful businessman in California. And he said, I opened up a jet ski and parasail business in Belize. And he said, I will tell you, Michael, we've always talked about doing something together. But the thing about Belize is they're about 15 years behind all the other Caribbean islands. So just pick something that's working at another Caribbean island and bring it to Belize and you'll make money. And so that was kind of the impetus. We kind of viewed it as a sign from the heavens, and went down, started doing due diligence, quit our jobs. And once we got the business going, and off we went.
And how long have you been doing it?
We started in 2016.
2016. So your kids were out of the house. They'd been out of the house for a while. And so it's really you and your wife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would never do it if I had kids that were, frankly, if the kids had stayed in Chicagoland, I wouldn't have done it. I would want to be part of their lives, but one's in the Pacific Northwest and one's in Northern California. So I see them as often when I'm in Belize as when I'm not.
Yeah. So what's the business?
Well, so here's the special hook. So as you know, if you go to Ambergris Caye, it's mostly based on water sports, but a lot of people that go to Ambergris Caye and only Ambergris Caye will do a day trip to the mainland to go see the Mayan ruins, or do cave tubing, or zip lining, or go to what's called the ATM cave, or horseback riding. And it's a great experience. It's a whole different, I always describe it as a different country, because as you know, Ambergris Caye is in the flats and in the beautiful water and on the barrier reef, whereas the mainland is rainforest and rivers. And so an entirely different environment. So I always encourage people to do that. So I did some due diligence when I first got there as far as what businesses were needed there. And I essentially went to the major resorts in Ambergris and asked the same question, which is what's missing, essentially. And a pattern started to develop when I talked to them. And the pattern was everybody loves those day trips to the mainland. They come back and they complain about the quality of the tour vehicle. It's rusted out. There's no air conditioning. There's bad shocks. The guide is looking over his shoulder, yelling at us about the sights. We can't see anything. So we imported super stretch SUV limousines, and we do mainland tours in 20 passenger Ford Excursion limousines, and it's done fantastic. We were really lucky. We hit a big speed bump with COVID, as you can imagine. Our business was just starting to hum when COVID hit, and literally the country shut down. So that was a bit of an impediment, but we bounced back.
And the business is doing fine again, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting about it is, so if you would have talked to me 4 years ago before COVID, I would have been preaching the fact that anybody that tries to run a business as an absentee owner in Belize is out of their minds and is going to lose their shirts. It cannot be done. And lo and behold, one of the things COVID taught me, just out of necessity, was if you find the right people and you have the kind of the right process in place, you can make it work. We go down there, 6 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year, whatever we desire. 2 months out of the year, it's up to us. When we go, and we come back when we want to come back. But we don't have to be there any longer, which is a really freeing thing. So it kind of runs itself. I do a little bit of work on it in the mornings, and a little bit of work at night. And once in a while, I'll answer a question during the day. But for the most part, it's a well-oiled machine, and I just have the best general manager to thank for that.
How did you find the GM?
When I first got to the country, I was introduced to actually my buddy from college. He had an employee this is Belize. He had an employee whose cousin was in the tourism business on the mainland. So I met with him and started talking with him, and told him what I was looking for. And he helped introduce me to drivers and guides. And thanks to him, I found the right people. It took a while. I mean, we went through, a range of people, and people didn't show up and things like that. But actually, the guy that's my general manager now, who I attribute for keeping my business alive during COVID, was one of the first people I actually interviewed for a job when I got there.
Yeah, it's fun when you get lucky enough to run into folks like that.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as I mentioned before, I'm a pretty cynical guy, and I'm kind of cynical about Belize, to be honest. But then there are these gems like this guy, Jason, who change your life, and he's almost like a son figure to me, and I'm almost like a father figure to him. And I trust him with my life and my finances, and he's always proven himself to be trustworthy. So it's great, and he cares about the business greatly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're somewhat cynical about Belize. I imagine you have stories, and you obviously leave names out because you've done a nice job of leaving names out of most of this conversation, or names of companies as well. Couple of stories that a tourist might say, really? But understanding that there's a line between the first 30 days or first 60 days and then time after.
Yeah, well, this is a terrible thing to say, but there is a good level of corruption in Belize, as you might imagine, and there's two ways to handle that. You either stick by your principles and pack up and go back to the United States, or you learn to play the game. And I hate to say that, but that's the truth. And I learned that very, very poignantly when we brought the limos into Belize, and I couldn't get them out of customs because they wanted to charge me twice the value of each vehicle for duty. And they sat there. I know they sat there, and then finally someone said, "Dude, you just have to pay somebody." And I said, "Really?" And said, "You just have to pay somebody." And much to my chagrin, I did that, and lo and behold, they were released. So, like it or not, that's how things are done. That's how you get licenses. That's how you get approvals, and that's distasteful to me. And it's interesting because when I mention that to my Belizean friends, they go, "Well, the United States is corrupt too." And I said, "I'm sure we've got our level of corruption, and you hear the stories and the newspaper ads." I said, "But I will tell you, I'm not a spring chicken. I've never once had to pay for any type of license or anything of that nature in order to do business. It's always been on the up and up and always legit." So that's unfortunate. And part of it, they always say it's a function of it being just such a desperately poor country.
Yeah, I mean, if we grew up in Belize, we might have fallen into that way of being as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I can't really criticize them. I mean, I have one friend who said they call me Mr. Mike's down there. I don't know what the S is all about, but it's Mr. Mike's. And we were driving around on the golf cart one day, and he said, "Mr. Mike's, I'm going to be mayor of this town someday." And I said, "Well, I bet you will be." And he said, "Yep." He said, I'm only going to be a little corrupt because I want to do things right."
He's going to run on, "I'm only going to be a little corrupt."
That's right. That's his campaign slogan. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you have a Facebook following, you were telling me, I think, about your Belize.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do something called Adventures in Belize, which are just my anecdotal stories of craziness in Belize. And it's one of those things that most people don't believe is true, unless they've actually been there or lived there for some time. I mean, yeah. One of my favorite examples is St. Patrick's Day on Ambergris Key. There, at that time, it's gone now, but there was actually an Irish pub on Ambergris Key. So of course you're going to go to the Irish pub on St. Patrick's Day. And so I go to the Irish pub, and of course they're doing the traditional Irish dish of chicken pot pie. I don't know why, but that's not traditional. So I order the special, the chicken pot pie, and out comes this pot pie, and it's clearly beef. And so I call the waitress over, and I said, "Yeah, that's fine. It happens." I go, "I'm sorry, I ordered chicken. This is beef." And she goes, "Oh, chicken pot pies are special. It's delicious." I said, "Yes, that's why I ordered it, but this is beef." "Well, why do you have beef if you ordered chicken?" And I said, I don't know. I ordered chicken though." She goes, "Oh yeah, the chicken's delicious. You should have the chicken pot pie." I said, "Yes. So if you could take this, and I want the chicken pot pie." "That's a good choice, sir. You should have chosen that in the first place." And I said, "Okay." And then she started to take it away, and I said, "Can I ask you a question? I don't remember even seeing beef pot pie on the menu." She goes, "Oh yeah, it's not on the menu. There's no beef pot pie." And I went, "Okay, bring me the chicken pot pie." So stories like that are abundant.
Did you get chicken pot pie?
Oh, I ultimately did. Yes, I did. Yes. Similar story. One time I was going to the airport, and I can't remember if I must have been leaving. I had to be leaving. I was leaving to come back to the States, and I had 2 bags. And I saw the guy tagging my bags, and he put 2 baggage tags on one bag and 0 on the second bag. And so I said, "Excuse me, you put 2 tags on one bag. You shouldn't have done that." He goes, "Well, no, sir, you have two baggage claims." And I said, "I do, but you put them on this." And I swear to God, we went around for half an hour with me trying to explain how he put 2 baggage, and then he blamed me for it. He basically said, well, why would you do that, sir? So very, very common story. Another example, one day I was going on the water taxi to Belize City, and they give you, of course, a paper ticket to go on the water taxi. I had walked in. I was the only one. I was one of the last guys on. And as I was standing lined up to get on the water taxi, a big gust of wind came in, blew my ticket out of my hand, and it landed in the ocean right over the dock. And so I called one of the guys over and goes, I got a problem. My ticket's right there. You would have thought I said the boat engine just fell off, and because they had no concept of how to handle the situation. And I said, well, this woman inside knows I just bought the ticket, and she knows me. He goes, yes, sir. And I said, and you see my ticket? It's right there. You can actually see it. It's physically right there. Yes, sir. But you must have a ticket to get on board. I said, I know, my ticket's right there. And we went around and around and around, and I didn't think I was going to actually get on. And it wasn't that they were being jerks about it. They just couldn't process how this, because they had to have a ticket in their hand. They just had to.
It sounds like a Belizean Abbott and Costello kind of environment.
It is very much who's on first. That conversation happens all the time. Yeah, all the time.
But where are you now? Are you in Chicago?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So what's the best time of year to go to Belize?
Optimal time, in my view, is like January through March.
Gotcha, because it's really cold in Chicago.
Yes, and the weather is usually idyllic in Belize. It's not too hot, not too cold. I mean, right now, this is the rainy season in Belize. I would never recommend anyone going there September through end of November. Starts to turn around in December, and then it starts to get brutally hot, like April, May, June, July is really terribly hot and terribly muggy.
Yeah, got it. All right, well, hey, tell me, well, actually, I'm going to ask you a question I haven't asked in a while. It used to be a standard, and I went away with it, not intentionally, just kind of faded. But you seem like a guy who is going to give a really good set of answers here. So imagine you are a talk show host. It could be a daytime show, nighttime show, late night, whatever. You're only doing it once. You're going to have 3 or 4 guests. They can be alive or dead. They can be famous or not famous. They can be family members, a friend you haven't talked to in a while. You can go for pure fun. You can go for humor. You can go for thought-provoking. It can be whatever you want. It can be a mix of all those things. It can be whatever you want it to be. 1 male, 1 female, 1 musical act, so a soloist or a group. And then if you enjoy comedians, can be stand-up or maybe a more broad definition of comedian. Who would your comedian be?
Okay. My comedian would be Stan Laurel for sure. There was something special about Laurel and Hardy when I was growing up. At 10:30 every single Friday night in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, they'd play reruns of Laurel and Hardy shorts. And that was a tradition for my father and I. We would go get pizza, and he'd let me stay up late, and we'd watch Laurel and Hardy. And I thought they were the funniest guys in the world. So, and I also then, as I grew up and learned a little bit more about their act, I realized what an interesting relationship they had and what an interesting business person Stan Laurel was. So that'd be my comedian for sure.
All right, love it. How about music?
Music would be Mozart.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to really understand the tragedy and the true story about his genius, and what it was like to live in that time of our world, and the fact that he was, just a child prodigy is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about him, so I would definitely want to check your talk show out. And Laurel and Hardy, I think, are still funny to a lot of folks alive today.
Oh, absolutely. Have you seen that movie that was done about them with William? Is it William Riley? Is that his name?
I haven't seen it.
It's really, if you like Laurel and Hardy at all, it's really good. They capture them quite well. Yeah.
All right, I'll check it out. All right, your last 2 are a male and a female.
Male and a female. Male, as maudlin as it sounds, would be my father. Because as you know, if you lose, I didn't lose my parents super young, but I was in the midst of creating my career and raising children. They were young. And I always thought there'd be time when I got older, to spend time with him and to pick his brain and to learn about his life. And, that was next. Let me just get my kids raised. And that didn't happen. So absolutely my father, without question. Woman, who would I want? I think, and I'm terrible with names, but I think maybe Margaret Thatcher would be somebody I'd be very interested in talking to, because she really paved the way for female politicians, as far as I'm concerned, in leadership roles. So I'd love to hear the struggles she went through and the adversity she had and the sexism she faced. So I think that'd be my female.
Yeah, I would love to talk to. I think she would be my answer if you asked me that question.
Yeah, in the past, when I've been asked similar questions, I always say Abraham Lincoln, of course, just because I think he's a fascinating, twisted, tormented soul who was just a genius, and the only person that could have gotten us through that point in time. He was the right person at the right time, and I don't think we'd be a country if it wasn't for him. So I'd love to interview him as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think there was anybody before him, at least not for decades before him and decades after, that could have done what he was able to do.
Right.
Or able to lead. All right, so let's close, Michael. Tell me about Bonnie and tell me about your kids.
I will. Bonnie is the smartest person I've ever met. And we have kind of a funny story. I can't tell too much of it to a PG audience, but when we met in college, we didn't really know each other that well. We lived in the same dorm, but we actually spent one evening together, if you know what I mean, at a party. And that was it. I was dating someone. She was dating someone. Had a very nice time together and would see each other on campus occasionally, but that was all there was to it. Just kind of a nice little memory. And then she got married and I got married, and we never spoke, after college was out at all. And I always anticipated she'd go back to the East Coast because she was a big New York snob, having grown up in Connecticut, and always talked about New York. And I knew she was doing advertising and radio, TV, film. So occasionally I think about her over the years. I think, she's probably doing some type of production in New York or something. Good for her. And then lo and behold, I was on the dating sites, the dating apps after I got divorced. So 4 or 5 years after I got divorced, and flipped open one of them, and by golly, there she was. And I was just stunned. And it was actually kind of prophetic. I haven't told you the whole story because I know we're running short on time, but I had kind of taken a break from the whole dating world for a while. I'd just broken up with someone I'd been dating for 3 or 4 months. And I thought, and this was about March during that year, I thought, I'm going to take the summer off from dating. It's kind of getting tedious. I just want to enjoy the summer and enjoy my freedom. And in the fall, maybe I'll think about dating again. But for right now, I'm not even interested. I'm shutting off all my dating apps. And then one Friday night, I was bored and just thought, I'm just going to see what's out there. And I flipped it on. She was the first person to show up, and it turns out that she had just started on the site. So kind of the intersection of that timing was crazy. So I reached out to her, and I actually reached out to her on Facebook. We weren't friends, but I found her on Facebook, and I said, "Hey, it's Michael. I can't believe you're here in Chicago, and I can't believe you're single. I'd love to see you," and that kind of thing. Turns out I find out later that she gets this note, and she's furiously corresponding with all her mutual friends on Facebook saying, "Who is this guy? Am I getting catfished? Is he legit?" And they were saying, "Yeah, he's legit." And she couldn't remember our little, evening together that was so memorable to me for the life of her. Still to this day does not. She blames, college partying and alcohol and the like for it. But it's been kind of a funny story that she doesn't remember that. But we were both not in the market to ever get married again. We enjoyed it. We both had decent marriages that just for whatever reason, we grew apart, that type of thing. It wasn't anything tremendously traumatic, but we also were very much enjoying our freedom again after all those years of being married. And within 2 months, it was like, yeah, we got to be together. So it's been fantastic. We're still, we're about 8 years into it, and we're still waiting for our first fight. So we're very, very similar. We think quite a bit alike. My daughter's 32. She's a teacher, teaches elementary school out in the Pacific Northwest. She's married to a military guy, so she bounces around a little bit. And she has made me a grandparent, which is amazing.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
A little 2-year-old grandson who's just the apple of my eye. I just love the kid desperately. My son is in Northern California, and he's an interesting and impressive guy. While he was in college out there at St. Mary's, he stumbled upon a guy who ran a cloud solutions company, who was actually allegedly one of the inventors of the cloud, and had broken up and started his own company. And he was neighbors with someone my son knew. My son had been doing some tutoring for their high school students, and the guy that ran the cloud solutions company was complaining to this family friend that he needed help, and he thought he should hire an intern. He said, "Well, you got to hire this kid. He's whiz bang. He's a genius." So he hired my son. So while in college, my son ultimately was the chief information officer of this cloud solutions company while going to school, and actually quit school to do it full time. And I said, "Well, you're going to go back?" He said, "Well, of course I'm going to go back." And I said, "Well, there's no shame in not going back. You're doing better than anybody in your age category, being a CIO of a major company." I said, "If you don't want to go back, you won't be offending me." He said, "No, I want that degree." And so lo and behold, he held down a really high end job and got his degree. And while doing that, he didn't really have the college experience I would hope my kids to have, but nonetheless, he's done really well. So he excelled at that. And then he wound up buying a bunch of franchises of a coder school, and has done super well at that. And he's also the CIO of their corporate offices. So he's kicking it. He's age 30, and he's doing amazing.
How old was he when he became a CIO?
24, 25, probably.
Only in Northern California.
Only in Northern California. Yep, that's right.
I mean, there are brilliant people in Northern California that seem to have a higher risk tolerance than the rest of the world.
Yeah. I'm very proud of both of them for different reasons. I mean, he's got that end of it, and my daughter has the more humanistic side that she's really nailed, and she's a great teacher and loves people, and everybody loves her. And he's just more of a driven, go-getter corporate guy who you would just enjoy sitting down and talking to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like you have great relationships with your kids, and sounds like you and Bonnie were made for each other.
Yeah. The great thing about my kids too is they, unlike a lot of kids their age, and I know this sounds like I'm speaking of an old man, but they've got an incredible work ethic, both of them. They both work way too hard, honestly. I wish they'd work less hard. That's kind of a rarity in this day and age, is to find someone in that age category that really is, working the 12, 14-hour days because they want to, and they want to excel. And that can be good or bad. I'm not saying that there are better people because of that, but it's unusual to find that in 30-somethings that work that hard and are that driven.
Yeah, and it's good to have that experience so you can draw on it and go back to it when times maybe get tough down the road.
That's right.
Hopefully they never do, but they can draw on that. Well, really cool meeting you, Michael. I think let's end with this. You've toyed with the idea of starting your own podcast.
That's right. What's
the idea there?
Well, I think my adventures in Belize could make a very entertaining and interesting podcast, because we only just scratched the tip of the iceberg of the things I could think of as we were sitting here. I have 100 stories of crazy events, of things things that have happened to me in Belize, and encounters I've had with the Belizean people and tourists alike. So that's my dream, is to turn that into a podcast. My wife wants me to write a book on it and turn it into kind of a quasi fiction, but I think it's more geared towards a podcast serial type of undertaking.
Yeah. So you have a choice to make between just organic storytelling or a scripted podcast. Which way are you leaning? I'm
leaning towards scripted. I think it'd be more conducive to a scripted podcast, honestly. So,
okay.
Or, maybe, I don't know, maybe be a little situation where you could dive into those little vignettes. I don't know if you ever listened to Lindsey Graham on the Wondery podcast.
No.
He's pretty good, but he winds into both doing kind of narrative and also kind of a dramatic reenactments, and it's kind of interesting. It's a good way to do it. He's not a very good actor, but he does a good job of weaving those two concepts together.
If you were going to do scripted drama approach, would you play all the characters?
I would not. No, I would have to hire a Belizean actor. Have to.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. No doubt.
No
one could capture that other than a Belizean.
I am by no means an expert on podcasting, but I do know enough to be dangerous and maybe answer a few questions along the way for you. So yeah, I'm always available.
No, I'm in. That's great.
Cool. Well, Michael, great talking to you. Tell your wife that you had an amazing time, and it's maybe the best experience of your life other than when you're with her.
I will tell her that, and just in time for the Republican debates. So that's perfect.
Oh, you watch those?
This is like my Super Bowl. Yeah,
Really?
absolutely. Yep. It's popcorn and beer and, nobody can interrupt me type of thing for me.
Yeah, I guess it can be seen as entertainment. It's yeah, I have a tough time watching those things, but maybe I could take a different angle into it and
Yeah, just think of it as a train wreck, and it's perfect.
knowing it's going to be a train wreck, it's fine. It's all fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Who's gonna do the most outlandish thing is the real question.
Yeah, so it's tonight.
It's tonight. It's in 12 minutes.
Oh, well, I will let you get your popcorn ready. But thanks for doing this.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.